And we are live. Welcome back, everyone. I see that we have 7 people here, and I must say that I know some of them personally, but the most important guest here is Aaron, the founder of OVR. I think you already have listened to the keynote some minutes ago. So how does this work? We will try to get this as much interactive as possible. So if you have questions, maybe you know that you need to raise your hand digitally. So there is the option here somewhere that you click, you raise your hand, and I will approve for you to come on stage and ask questions to Aaron. If you don't feel fancy to come on stage, just write on the chat. I will read it out loud to Aaron. If there are no questions, I will as well bring some questions from yesterday guests. And I also have my own questions because indeed, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, a lot of talks and presentations from Aaron. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about, and Aaron is kind of a guru in my opinion. So thank you, Aaron, for coming, and it's really nice to have you here.
Thank you, Pedro, for the kind words and for inviting me here. I'm thrilled to be here and excited to answer some questions and talk about olfaction and the future of unlimited realities.
Thank you. So the first question is already here. It's from Roberto, and he says, it looks to me that OVR have a technology that can be considered like an inkjet printer with smells instead of colors. Is it true that there are basic smells that can be combined to create additional ones, something like basic colors?
There's a simple answer and a complex answer to that. And so in a lot of ways, the technology does have some parallels to printer ink cartridge technology in the sense that, it's very small, it's releasing a very precise amount of liquid, microfluidics comes into play. And unfortunately, when it comes to our sense of smell, there's no such thing as CMYK or RGB. So there is no universal base compounds that can then get combined to create any smell that you might think of. However, depending on the application, what we do is we do take themes, right? So rather than thinking of it as CMYK or RGB, what we do in our current technology is we have 9 separate odor chambers, and we select the 9 appropriate base odor components that can create as many possible combinations for a particular set of environments. In our case, we do, as you probably noticed in the talk, a lot of health and wellness functions and training and simulation functions. Health and wellness is very nature focused. So we've come up with, using our sensory expertise, using a lot of analytical chemistry, 9 base components that can then compound with each other to create dozens or hundreds of different odor combinations that can replicate most of the odors that you would find in nature, whether it's deciduous forest in North America, whether it's a pine forest in Siberia, whether it's a tropical beach in the Caribbean. We can replicate a good deal of those odors with some common themes and base components. The holy grail, of course, would be if we were to be able to create something that's CMYK or RGB, but it's not technologically possible yet. And there's very valid questions about whether or not that would ever be physiologically possible, and very unlikely. So thank you for your question.
Okay, Roberto, if you have more questions, if you want to raise your hand, I know that you have previously raised the hand in other sessions. Feel free to come on stage and interact with us. Okay, he accepted the challenge. No, it's another person. I need to give the mic to Kartik that I also saw that wrote on the chat about the project, a very specific one. Kartik?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I have done some interesting research on Buddhist theories about smell and how it relates with meditation. So I think it has some possible applications, industrial applications in health industry, as well as in spiritual practices, and I think also for wellness industries, and maybe it can have applications in forest produce, as well as in military applications. So I know it's too much to talk about, but uh, is this something which you'll be interested in to pursue?
Yes, the short answer is yes, absolutely. And we are in fact pursuing both of those tracks already in different ways. And I think, for immersive technology, there are so many potential applications for immersive technology, even within health and wellness or military simulation training. You can break those down into a lot of subtopics. And no matter any way you look at it, by increasing the presence and immersion in that experience, you're going to increase the efficacy. So whether you're training to perform a simple task, or whether you're using immersive technology to promote relaxation and a sense of well-being, the technology and the experience is going to perform better the more senses you engage. When you think about all human experience, really starts as sensory input. It's then processed by your brain, and then the output is emotions and behaviors and memories. So if you're able to carefully control the sensory inputs, and you know a little bit about the brain, then you can assume with a good degree of certainty what the outputs are going to be. And that could be learning, it could be skills acquisition, it could be stress relief, it could be spirituality, it could be a number of things. But more specifically, how our sense of smell relates to those is, for one, it's unique in all of our other senses that it's the only one that has a direct connection to the limbic system in our brain, which is where emotions and long-term memory lives. So there's some figures that are thrown out by experts that anywhere from 60 to 80% of your memory recall throughout the day is inspired by your sense of smell, even though you don't notice it doing that. So in the case of learning and skills acquisition, having a sensory component there is going to make whatever you're doing committed to long-term memory more readily, and then you will more readily recall that when you encounter those sensory triggers in the field later on. So that's the training and simulation side. We're very fascinated with the physiological effects of smell on the human body as it pertains to health and wellness. Now, all of us are born with about the same sense of smell. And I mean that physically, we're born with about the same amount of smell receptors that perform about the same. And our relationship to smell is about the same. All of our likes and dislikes and associations are learned over the course of our lifetime. There are really no smells that inherently make us more relaxed or more energized. Those are things that we learn over time. However, once we create those associations, once we associate citrus with energy, lavender with calmness, we then actually experience those physiological effects when we smell them later on. And so one of the things that we are working on right now in our wellness platform is linking scent and breath in a mindfulness meditation. And that does a few things. One, we all know the benefits of meditation. Meditation is very good for the brain and body. There's a lot of studies about that. But a lot of people don't do it for a number of reasons. And one is that it's kind of hard. When you live a normal kind of 9 to 5 everyday life, it's hard to force yourself into that state of mind. It's hard to not succumb to distractions. But when you close off the outside world and you link your breath with the smell of something beautiful, like a flower or a fresh orange, and you're in a beautiful nature environment, then you begin to find it much more easy to pay attention to your breath, much more easy to relax. And then your association with those scents and that mood state and that sense of well-being becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. So then you have what we would call a deliberate mood state and a scent memory association. So that's one of the things that we're most interested in right now. And although we're extremely passionate about olfaction and olfactory technology, we are definitely, there's so many unanswered questions out there about, and I think you brought up spirituality, for instance. There's the cultural significance of spirituality and scent that changes throughout history in different cultures. And then there's the parts of our brain that involve scent that we maybe don't fully understand. So I think there's a ton that we could do with it, and I'd be happy to talk more about this Kartik either today if there's more time, or in the future, and dig deeper. But thank you for your question.
And thanks for the answer, Aaron. Indeed, very correlated to this, there was someone yesterday asking a lot about emotions. So if with smells, we could or not change the person emotion, and if we could influence it by using the smell with that goal.
Mm-hmm. That is a great question, and the answer is not could we, because it's already being done. Almost every single person who has attended this conference was influenced emotionally by smell 30 times before they even left their house for work in the morning. The flavor and fragrance industry has been doing this with consumer products and goods, and scent branding and marketing and hotel lobbies and retail stores for a very, very long time. They know very well the association between our emotions and our sense of smell, and they use it. I'm going to use the word manipulate, but not in a negative way. They use it to manipulate how you perceive yourself, how you perceive others, what products you buy, what things you stay away from. An example that I love to use is in North America, we have this idea of what the smell of clean is. That's relatively recent. There's no universal smell of clean, right? The smell of true cleanliness would be nothing. True cleanliness would smell of nothing. But Tide laundry detergent is the smell that most of us associate with clean. And that is very deliberate. That just didn't happen by accident. That was a lot of research, consumer research, scientific research on how people responded. And prior to scenting laundry detergent, all laundry detergent was sold on the advertising premise of how well it got things clean. But when they went out and actually looked at what people did, the first thing they did when they pulled their clothes out of the dryer or off the line was they smelled them. They didn't expect them to see how clean it was under a microscope. They smelled them. And so when you start kind of linking smells with emotions and behaviors, then you're able to produce that outside of the experience you learned it in. So I think all of us have tons of experiences when we think about like the perfume our first boyfriend or girlfriend wore, or the first time we had a particular food, or the first time you went to the beach or the mountains. And when you catch a whiff of that smell later on in your life, boom, you are instantly transported, not just to the memory, but the emotion associated with that memory. Now, as I mentioned before, there's no kind of objective, this scent creates this emotion. Those are still learned behaviors, but you can learn them very quickly. The more intense the experience is, the more quickly and powerfully the smell of that mood is linked. So if you have a very emotionally intense experience, then the smell that associated with that will be able to bring up that emotion much more readily later on. And so you can do that pretty quickly, or you can do it more delicately over time. I believe that, the future, our digital futures, right? When we already spend, over 11 hours a day looking at a screen, interacting with the digital world. It's going to be even more than that in the near future. And if we're only engaging our eyes and ears, then we're kind of collectively as a civilization ignoring that kind of human emotional part of our bodies and our brains. People don't pay attention to scent all that much until they lose it. One of the side effects of COVID-19 virus for a lot of people is they lose their sense of smell. And there's reports of these people who live these like really dreary kind of black and white, emotionally devoid lives after losing their sense of smell because they interact with the world in a much different way. And I think if we go into the future, the digital future, and ignore our sense of smell, our experiences are going to be kind of sterile and black and white, just like losing our sense of smell in the real life. So to create the emotion and mood that gives our lives the depth and complexity that we have now, we need to really engage it. Thank you for your question.
But yeah, now now that you mentioned the Tide example, the detergent, indeed I heard it before, and I also used that example yesterday. And people ask it one question. Yes, brands are using it. They do use a lot the scent in the offline world, But when it comes to the online world, do you have some examples of marketing campaigns or brands that are already trying to use it?
Very few. Last year, Bulgari did. I believe they were the first major fragrance brand to release a scent in virtual reality, and they did that out of necessity. Fragrance is such a sensory thing that you have to experience it in person to really understand it. The parts of our brain that process scent have no capacity for language. So even when trying to describe something that I smell to you, you're not going to really understand it the way I do. So Bulgari did a virtual reality experience last year to release one of their new fragrances. There have been some attempts, and we're definitely not the first people to try this. I think a lot of people might remember, I mentioned in the talk, Smell-O-Vision in the 60s. Colossal disaster, but even at that point, people understood that incorporating scent in that media experience was going to make it more enriching. The technology just wasn't there at that point. And that's one of the reasons that we developed the technology we did, is that there's a recognized desire for this to happen, but the existing technology didn't allow for it. So we developed a technology that could. And so now that it exists, we hope to see much more of that. And of course, we want to drive that, but no matter who's doing it, that's a benefit.
Thank you, Aaron. Now I'm going to read the question from Luis Enrique. He just asked, what is your view on the use of OVR tech on hospitals? Are there use cases you can share already?
Yes. So let me see. I'll have to be careful what I share. And before I share the use in hospitals, I want to be very clear that we are not medicine, right? We're not presenting this as a drug or a medical device. So my opinion and these use cases are anecdotal and they're therapeutic, but they're not medical claims. So our first clinical pilot study, which was a small group that was done in a healthcare center, University of Vermont Medical Center, on pain, stress, and anxiety, was very, very promising. So the Department of Inpatient Psychiatry at UVM-MC used an olfactory virtual reality experience over the course of 2 to 3 weeks for patients who experienced a number of different disorders, such as OCD or PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, and they were in the hospital for 2 to 3 weeks. A couple times a week, they were asked and they volunteered to try an olfactory virtual reality experience that was nature-based, that was not a game. There was no objective. They could just relax in this camping environment and make a fire, roast marshmallows, pick wildflowers, and then report on how they felt both immediately before, immediately after, and then 3 hours after, about 3 hours after. Every single subject benefited from the experience, some more than others, but everyone benefited. And generally speaking, both the statistically relevant data from the study showed a marked increase in the self-reported data about pain, stress, and anxiety. And there was also really promising anecdotal data about people's just kind of personal feeling about the experience being just such a lovely break from such, whether it's a hard day, a hard week, a hard life, a hard, whatever they're dealing with. It was such a welcome experience that it didn't just work in the moment, but when we took data 3 hours afterwards, they were still experiencing those benefits. So we're going to be going on to, of course, do more studies, some of them more informal, some of them with a lot of scientific rigor, and understand some more of the use cases. At OVR Technology, none of us are medical professionals. So we don't presume to know exactly what the best use cases are. So we are partnering with researchers and medical doctors, primarily in the integrative health space, to see how reducing stress can make the patients feel better, make them more relaxed, make the healthcare providers their lives easier, their jobs easier, save money, save lives.
Okay, I just saw that. Meanwhile, Luis asked if there is any public report that he can access to share or that you can share with us.
Yep, these results were published in the Journal of Science and Medical Research. Sometimes I reverse that. It's Health Science and the Journal of Health Science and Medical Research. And I can, Pedro, I'm not sure if I can upload that resource somewhere afterwards, but I'd be happy to share a link to the publication.
Yes, let me think what's best. Well, either you can, the people here in this session, they should know OVR, they should know Experience Plus. So either you publish on OVR, I'm also very happy to share it at Experience Plus, and you can find the report there. Or if you have the link, Andy, we can also share it in the general chat, because maybe more people want to read it. Yeah.
Sure. I can actually pull up the link right now.
Okay. Great.
Journal of Medical Research and Health Sciences, and this is not the direct link, but this is a link that will get you there.
Okay, I just saw it. Perfect. Thank you for that, Aaron. I
My
just
pleasure.
saw that Anil is also here. Anil, do you want to raise your hand and come on stage? I would be happy to promote you. Let's see. Or someone with additional questions. I see here Kartik is still. Let me try to see. And Mike. Kartik, I just saw that you were still with the resident. Do you want to ask something?
Yeah, I was wondering how one can get involved with OER, because I have so many
Right
ideas.
away.
I would like to be of some use.
We'd love to chat. I can actually put my direct email address in the chat right now.
Okay.
So we can, have an in-depth conversation. Just make sure I spelled my email correctly. It looks like I did. That's great. But yeah, we'd love to. It looks like you're based in India, Kartik. So we don't have a great technical support in India at the moment. So it would be difficult to get you a physical demonstration right off the bat. But we could definitely start with a conversation and figure out, how we might be able to get you to experience it.
Sure.
Thank you, Kartik.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kartik.
Okay. So if someone wants to raise the hand, perfect. If not, I will keep on monopolizing the meet and greet. Indeed, I also prepared here a question that was from a partner of Experience Plus that is always very interested as well about devices and on how scalable the use cases of the devices are. So maybe now I take the opportunity, because you did not mention it in your presentation, to go a bit more in the details of the device itself. So the device enables to diffuse up to how many smells, and how do you imagine that on the long run people can use it for a lifetime? So do you imagine that people will then purchase different smells, aromas? Can you enlighten us your vision on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, thinking about the three interconnected points, the hardware, the software, and the scentware, as all working together as the system. And that system understands user behavior in the virtual world, transmits it to the technology, where it then emits micro droplets of scent. So the cartridge itself, the scentware cartridge, is the thing that actually holds the scents, and that's replaceable. However, we're really committed to having minimal environmental impact. So the way that we go about utilizing this technology and getting it in people's hands is through a leasing model or a subscription model with a circular economy. So no one will have to outright buy anything. You'll just pay a monthly fee, and we'll supply you with any of the software you need, the technology, and then scent cartridges as you replace them, or as you need them, they'll just get automatically replaced, kind of like printer ink cartridges, as someone mentioned before. When you're done with that, you just drop it in the envelope that we provide for you. They get sent back, reconditioned, and then sent back out. It's depending on uses, those cartridges will need to be replaced every 2, maybe 3 months before they get used up. But we're releasing such a small amount of smell, they do last a long time. This allows us to create very, very little virgin material. So we only have to manufacture a small amount of things that we then use again, and we make very high quality versions of that. It also allows us to, as we make improvements, instead of having, buying something and then the latest version of it coming out 2 months later and having to buy it again, we will actually be able to continuously keep people updated with the most current technology. So as far as scalability goes, the software is obviously infinitely scalable. And then since we operate with the circular economy and we prefer additive manufacturing, so we can essentially, this is exaggerating a little bit, but produce a manufacture to order as people need them. So we can scale up and scale down manufacturing really easily. I think part of baked into that question too is a little bit about, okay, if someone wants to use this for a number of different use cases, would you have 1? Would you have 3? Would you have a whole bunch? And how would that work? Right now, as I mentioned, we kind of have categories. So it's not one cartridge for every virtual environment, but it's one piece of technology that works with any headset. It works with any virtual reality content with our plugin. And then you can select essentially from 3 categories of experience, a nature experience. For the training and simulation world, we have a combat or a trauma or a medic suite of olfactory stimulation. And so you can kind of think about the general category of use cases having one type of scent cartridge, and those get replaced on a regular basis. I probably wouldn't imagine someone who is working in a healthcare system to promote relaxation and de-stressing to go with a product that has smells like blood and burning flesh that they use for field medic training. So I think the use cases, those categories of use cases, you really kind of think about it as one cartridge, one piece of technology that serves a near infinite amount of virtual content in that category. Pedro, does that answer the question?
Yes. But there was another question popping up from Sungwon Jong. Is asking if you are collaborating with art exhibitions or entertainment industries, how could you incarnate the smell?
So that's the art and the entertainment are sometimes 2 separate things, and sometimes they're the same thing, which is another cool thing about not only virtual reality, but where we kind of think about entertainment being very separate from like our healthcare, for instance. And we see these things kind of all coming together, right? And smell is actually a unifying factor in a lot of those. And that's exciting. So to give you a specific example of how we are demonstrating value in the arts and entertainment world, although health and wellness is our primary focus, training and simulation secondary. And for instance, movies and video games are kind of like off in the future. We are exhibiting our first climate change piece at the Venice Biennale of Architecture starting at the end of May. So we collaborated with a development team in Australia and a village in Samoa. And this village in Samoa is being uprooted both physically and culturally because of rising sea levels from climate change. So what we did is we went there We interviewed the village elders, and we redesigned this village, both past, present, and what might happen in the future if we don't do something, into a virtual reality experience with all of the sense of that village. So you get to put on the VR headset. The elder tells you the cultural history, what's going on now, and what's going to happen if something doesn't get done, and you experience that firsthand. And so, yes, of course, it's very engaging and entertaining, but also it's an empathy piece that we really want people to think about climate change and other social environmental mental issues, not as other, right? It's not someone else's problem. And what's unique about immersive technology is when you're in there, you feel like it's happening to you. It really emotionally becomes happening to you, and it becomes your problem also. So by generating that amount of empathy, while being entertained, you kind of adopt that cause as your own. And so we hope that it doesn't just shine a light on this thing that needs action, but also inspires people to take action. So that's kind of where we're at the intersection of kind of health, personal health and wellness, global health and wellness, environmental health and wellness, and entertainment. And just, we're not really interested right now in video games or movies for a number of reasons that are more logistical than our taste, for instance. But we do see that as something exciting for us in the future. So I hope that answers the question.
While you were answering, I got an input on another question that popped up yesterday, which was, how do you collect the smells? Because people don't know how to do it or how you do it.
Probably that's the most fun part of the job, actually. So every smell, right? Whether you're off in the forest smelling the forest, or whether you're smelling a candle or toothpaste or whatever it is, every smell is a cocktail of different molecules, right? So that cocktail of different molecules, you inhale it, and then you get a certain perception. Your brain goes, okay, that's this or that. So even though your emotional reaction to it might differ from person to person, you can chemically, objectively, scientifically say that this is what the smell is. Now, unfortunately, we are sensitive to sometimes 1 part per billion of certain molecules when it comes to smell. So it's going to be really hard to identify what that chemical mixture is. So we do it in 2 ways at the same time. So we'll go out into the field, to capture a certain experience or environment, and we have developed a sampling technique for analytical chemistry. So we actually sample the air, we sample things that we find, and we're able to kind of measure to a certain degree what chemicals are in there. Myself and my scentware team also have trained for years about how to use our nose to recognize those as well. So we might go out and smell what is the forest, but identify, maybe 30 or 40 different individual molecules that are responsible for that smell. And then we compare the chemical data with our sensory data, and then make some assumptions about what's important information and what's not important information. Part of that too is that every single space and every single moment in that space will smell a little bit differently, and people will have a different association. So when I say I love the smell of the beach, Pedro, that you might have a very different memory of what the beach smells like, or an idea of what the beach smells like, versus any people in the chat would probably have a slightly different experience of what the beach smells like. However, there are some things that are similar. There are some constants, and our job is to identify what those constants are. So when we create a smell, we create it to be recognizable and memory evoking to as many people as possible. And we're almost never are 100% of people going to agree with me. So when I create a smell, on the bell curve of people who would agree with me, we're trying to get right in the middle to reach as many people as we possibly can. So once we get the chemical data, then in our laboratory, we rebuild that scent molecule by molecule. And then we use both the chemistry and the technology, the physical device itself, to control intensity, because intensity is a huge part of it. Something like lovely, like garlic. Most people love garlic. If you increase the intensity of the chemicals responsible for the smell of garlic, it's going to smell like someone ran over a skunk on the car almost. So intensity has a lot to do with it. And so there's a lot of fine tuning that takes place, that with all the instruments and the chemistry in the world, we still can't replace the human nose. So there's a big human element in there.
Okay, and that's a good hint or hook to what I wanted to ask next, which is, we have been discussing a lot here in this forum about the Internet of Senses and how great it would be to include all the senses while we are streaming. So for example, I'm now talking to you. If I have my coffee here with me, how likely is it that in some days or months or years that I could stream as well the smell to you, so that you can get in real time that I'm drinking a coffee or not a beer? I don't know. That we can stream as well the smells. What's your opinion about that?
Well, it's not so much that it's going to all happen at once, right? It's not going to just one day we get all of that, because we can actually do that to a certain degree already. You know, there is both like pattern recognition software where visually, if you're in a VR headset, it could recognize coffee versus beer to a certain degree. There's electronic nose, they call it like e-noses, sensing technology that can sense certain aromas and then transmit them across the world through the internet. So it's not so much that we can't do that right now. It's just that, is that cool enough or useful enough, more importantly, that it's worth the cost of it right now? And the answer is, for the most part, just kind of sharing a cup of coffee, it's not quite useful enough to incur adding that extra degree of complexity and technology. But as the immersive technology around us, as the Internet of Senses grows and the expectation of that quality gets better and better, the technology itself gets cheaper and smaller, then it will just be a given. I don't think it's going to take that long either. I think it's going to take a few years. I think maybe 5-10 years at the most. That's going to be a pretty commonplace thing. If you look at the evolution of television, right? We went from radio to black and white TV to color TV to flat screen, and it took a long time. It took a really long time, but things move so much more quickly now that I don't think it's going to take as long. And the other thing that is interesting to see now is people ask the question, why, right? Like, well, why would we need that? Isn't it good enough? And my answer to that, which is kind of glib, is like, well, how many black and white TVs do you see for sale at Best Buy? None. Because you can watch a small black and white TV with subtitles and no audio and understand what's going on. But why would you, when you can experience TV, flat screen, 4K, HD, full color? So people crave these better experiences no matter what the use case is. And when the technology becomes advanced enough where it kind of disappears and you just get the experience, that's the moment when you're only going to notice scent when it's not there. And that's not that far away.
Great answer, Aaron. I just, some minutes ago, there was one of the keynotes, I think it was from Singularity University HQ, saying exactly that, that we ask too many times why, when sometimes we should ask how and start building it. And in this case, it's exactly like that. We have some 10 minutes left, and I have someone that just raised the hand. I will try to end the mic to Milad. I hope it works.
Hello, first
Milad.
Hello again, Pedro, and hello to your guests. And I have one important question due to this, since all the humans' sense and colors, it's not same as other humans. For the smell, it's a similar condition. No, what's the proportion? What's the guess of this? What do you think about this kind of problem? As you know, the computer has to calculate these things, but when all the humans not have the same experience about colors and smells, and taste. What can you do for these problems, and what's your issue in this kind of situation? Thank you so much.
Yeah, great question. And my answer is probably not going to be as thorough as you're hoping for, but I'll do the best I can. So the differences in the way people perceive color is actually much less of a problem than the differences in the way people perceive scent, because our perception of scent is inextricably linked to our memories and emotions. We don't perceive scent in an objective way very often. We always perceive a scent and feel and remember at the same time. We always have an emotional reaction. And because when you're smelling something, it bypasses a lot of the cognitive part of your brain. You don't process it in a cognitive way like you do most of your other senses or a lot of other information, including visual information. It goes right to that old reptile part of your brain. It brings up a really important question: is how do you make something, scale it, and introduce it to everyone with the intention of having a similar reaction for everyone at the same time? And the answer is often you don't. And I think there's, to my earlier point about trying to find the mean, right? The mean response to olfactory stimulation and incorporating that, but also giving control to people about what type of experience they have and creating their own experiences, which is another fascinating thing that I haven't talked about much, which is as we spend more time in the virtual world, it's going to be less porting things that we're familiar with in the real world over to the virtual world and more creating new experiences, new environments, new relationships in the virtual world. And in that case, we get to decide collectively what it smells like, right? What does space smell like? What do lasers smell like? What do our avatars smell like? So the same way that we go to a store and there's different candles or perfumes or foods, and our preferences dictate what we buy, who we hang out with, places we interact, we're going to be afforded that same type of choice in the digital space as well. And actually, the only difference, which I think is exciting, is that you'll have more control over it. I love thinking about, worlds like Second Life, where people get to not just, the space was designed, then everybody makes it their own. And if we at OVR give people the tools to be able to do that for themselves, which is what we want to do through our open license plugin, and through just getting the tools out in people's hands, then you're going to be able to dictate what the experience is for you alone, or you and a group, or you and an industry. So, I think that's like a little bit of a non-answer to your question, is what are we going to do about that disparity? And the answer is a little bit of experimentation, but also kind of put it in people's hands, give you the power to create the experience that is going to have the most impact. And everything that we do, like creating a virtual environment that you can see and hear and smell, that's cool, right? But so what, right? So we never just create sense to create the sense that match the environment. We go, what is the desired outcome of this experience? If it's in health and wellness, we want people to be maybe reduce stress so they can perform better at their jobs, or they remember to take their medication, or whatever it is. And so what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve? And that's how we weave sense into the virtual space, is to achieve those outcomes. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you, Milad.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Milad, and thank you, Aaron, for replying. There is as well a question in the chat related to HR and people development. Do you think this can be applied as well here?
Yeah, I think that, I want to be careful how speculative I get. I don't want to just like start making shit up on the spot. But I think that to an earlier point I made about how people begin to associate smells with certain moods, and how people have pre-existing relationships with smells that produce certain memories or emotions. I think that when you put a number of people together in a physical environment or a virtual space, there's always the opportunity to either really, really mesh and perform well together as a team and really connect, or not. And I think a lot of that has to do with the right state of mind and emotional state, and to a huge degree, stress level. When, we're animals, humans are animals, and when we have a high degree of stress, the higher our stress goes, the less logical and rational our thought patterns are. So if we can make people feel more comfortable, and we can provide an environment and a mood state that is puts them in their best light and in their best mood, then we can definitely get them to perform much better. This is a question, this is not something that, we've experimented with or even necessarily intend to do, but mood state training, taking people into a virtual environment in a positive way and creating a relationship between a mood state and a scent, and then using that scent at strategic points in the workforce. I think there's potential to create a better sense of well-being and collaboration and positivity. So I think that and that's not even getting into how powerful immersive technology can be in just soft skills, conversation, interview, interpersonal skills without scent alone. I think that scent in the virtual space is absolutely critical for a number of applications. It's beneficial for a number of applications, but it's not necessary for every single one. There are some things that you might be able to get from the digital space without necessarily having to engage all of your senses. And there are some things that you don't need immersive technology for at all. Some things might still work better on a piece of paper or on a screen or on a Post-it note. I don't want to say that virtual reality and XR solves all problems and you should use it for everything.
I hope
Thank you, Stefano.
I hope you can hear me.
Yep.
So we have 3 minutes. I have a question that could take hours to reply, but indeed, it was raised up yesterday as well that every one of us has like a fingerprint smell that I think I also heard you in the past mentioning this, that indeed we spoke now about the relationships with employees and employees, but you can also apply this for dating. So for you to find your true match, your true love, maybe you could start using the smell when you are in the virtual world to really find someone that is compatible with you. I think it's a very interesting topic. Do you want to add something on this?
Sure. It's fairly well accepted that human beings communicate with each other through chemosensory stimulation. So, I think a lot of us have heard the term pheromones before, which is kind of iffy term, but all of us have an individual odor signature that, as you mentioned, it's more unique than our fingerprint. It's more unique than a retinal scan. And it says a lot of information about us. It says information about our immune systems and about our genetic makeup. And as I think you saw in the TED Talk, a lot of people believe that the reason that we kiss each other is actually a way for two people to sample the odor and in turn sample the genetic makeup and the immune system to see whether it's a good genetic match or not. And I find that really interesting. As of now, we don't have the technology to both decode someone's odor signature or really even know the mechanism that all of those odorants work upon. We kind of know that it's this thing that's going on, but we don't really understand fully how it works. And so I think that it's very possible in the future that once we understand our odor signatures better, not only it will be for dating, but it could be your, the next version of your facial scan, right? Deep fakes, are really, really tricky because they look real to us. We can't tell the difference visually between, you know, reality and fake things, but your odor is going to be unbelievably difficult to replicate. So, but until we get there, what I think is interesting is that you have the ability to present yourself in any way you want in the digital space. You have the ability to present how you look, how you sound, how you behave. And you now have the ability to present how you smell and how the environments that you interact with smell. And that's going to engage people emotionally. Whether you're dating or interacting, if you can engage people emotionally, it's a meaningful interaction. And that's one of the most incredible things about VR, XR, the internet, and the internet of senses is it's just the next level of human interaction.
Okay, Aaron, as I said, we could go for hours talking. Unfortunately, I need to jump into another session now, starting at 9. It's already 1 minute. So I hope that we can invite you soon and we can have some more opportunities to deep dive on other topics. Well, I think everyone has your contacts. So thanks everyone who joined. And especially thanks obviously to Aaron and to OVR team that was also here.
Pedro, thank you very much for having me. It was so much fun speaking with you and everyone who joined. And thank you so much for the questions. They were really, really thoughtful questions. And we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
See you. Thank you.